And so it begins. Zero Hedge posted today, a little while ago, from a few hours ago, from what time it is right now, me doing this video. Uh, Zero Hedge, social unrest breaks out in China after panic bank run on peer-to-peer lenders. 1 week ago, when discussing the source of China's next debt crisis, namely the recent explosion in Chinese household debt, which over the past year has soared by over 40%, even as credit growth across other debt categories remained relatively stable, and which was on the verge of surpassing the nation's corporations as the biggest source of credit demand, we highlighted the one financial sector that has recently emerged as most at risk in China's economy: online peer-to-peer lenders who collect money from retail investors and dispense small loans to consumers, usually without collateral, putting the loans at risk of a default with zero recovery. We what was that movie that I saw? The China Connection, the China something. I talked about this a while back because someone said something about it and I watched it. A little documentary. It's either on Netflix or Amazon Prime. The China Hustle. The China Hustle, I think is what it's called. And they'd put these, and make it look like, they'd have the investors come in, they'd make it look like a working facility, then they would leave, and then it'd become a ghost town. One truck a day comes in instead of like 5 or 10, loading up with stuff. No, it was there's just complete scams. And they made it look like real businesses. And this documentary, The China Hustle, goes over. If you haven't seen it, it's very interesting. You should watch it. Rent it for $2-3 on Amazon Prime if you don't, have the regular thing. So, quick look, surprised. China. All I think of is remember the mold, the black drywall, the black what was it? The black drywall. What was that called? We ran out of drywall during the housing boom of 2004 and ending in 5 and 6 or whatever. We had to get the Chinese drywall, which turned black and moldy. And the recourse, sorry, the companies are gone, they're bankrupt. It was a Chinese thing. We can't do anything about it. Remember that? Unbelievable. We pointed out that the outstanding loans on P2P platforms rose 50% just last year to a total of renminbi 1.49 trillion, or in US dollars $215 billion, making the size of China's peer-to-peer industry far bigger than the rest of the world combined. And due to their lack of collateral, interest rates often are as high as 37%, with additional charges for late payments. Peer-to-peer, in which platforms gather funds from retail investors and loan the money to small corporate and individual borrowers, promising high returns, started to flourish nearly unregulated in China in 2011. At its peak in 2015, there were about 3,500 such businesses. But after Beijing launched a campaign several years ago to diffuse debt bubbles and reduce risks in the economy, a campaign which recently reversed once the Trump trade war started getting hot, including the country's enormous non-bank lending sector, cracks began to appear as investors pooled their funds. As a result, the peer-to-peer lending channel not only got clogged up, but went in reverse. In a recent article, the Wall Street Journal reported that a string of Chinese internet lenders have already shut their doors in recent weeks, stranding investors as the economy slows. Had to pause that there for a second. I was yawning. Where was I? I just hit my mouse and then I moved it. Lenders have already closed their doors in recent weeks, stranding investors as the economy slows and regulators tighten controls over an unruly side of the fintech sector. Across China, more than 200 internet-based fund managers since late June have either shut down, closed parts of their operation, or are reeling from cash crunches, missing executives, and other problems, according to industry tracker Wandang Zijia. Why is it that in China, specifically, when things aren't looking good at a company, the executives just run off? Like you can't find them, they're gone. In other parts of the world, you don't normally hear that. The executive's right there, the company crumbled, he's got some explaining to do, and that's that. And maybe they'll go to jail for some reason or another, or maybe not. They just close up shop. Why is it in China they pick up and take off? We're out of here. Is it possible because of the China hustle? Like some of this stuff wasn't even like real? Like Ponzi scheme kind of thing? I don't know. The tide began to turn even more forcefully against the sector ahead of a late June deadline for new stringent registration regulations. With a slowing economy making it difficult for some companies to pay back loans, many lenders decided to simply shut down. Meanwhile, investors, already souring on the sector, began pulling out funds, further pinching the lending platforms. Lending platforms. Oh, you mean like the crypto Ponzi scheme lending platforms? We had all the crypto Ponzi's, every single one of them was a lending platform, and they all went kaputs. So China has the real thing, not a crypto, not digital. Nope. They got a real one. A lending platform. On what planet can someone charge 37% interest and the company that got the loan actually survive? Could you imagine being able to be profitable as a company and pay back a 37% loan? Oh, God. This is why I do these videos. But the crypto market, how come people aren't flooding into the crypto market? Oh, they will. They will. When this kind of stuff just happens more and more, and the problem over here, problem up, people are going to want to put their money somewhere safe or safer than where it's at. Follow me? Meanwhile, investors already souring on the sector began pulling out funds, further pinching the lending platforms, and as Reuters reports, since June, 243 online lending platforms have gone bust. Again, this is crypto. This is the same thing as the freaking Ponzi. BitConnect. According to WDZJ.com, a peer-to-peer industry data provider, in that period, the industry saw its first monthly net fund outflow since at least 2014. And as we noted last week, it was only a matter of time before social unrest spread as Chinese investors who had funded these usually small, unregulated peer-to-peer operations found that they, had lost all their money, demanding a bailout. This is like people, could you imagine the people who got into all the Ponzi's, BitConnect, USI, pick one. Laser, BitPetite, whatever, pick one. And then they demand from the government, bail us out. Bail us out, man. Hold on, you guys took the super high risk in which if you were the early ones in, you got paid massively back. First one's in, first one's out. But everyone else got screwed. You want us to bail you out, right? Unbelievable. That's precisely what happened, except for one thing. Beijing was already one step ahead. Oh, I can't even read. Yawning. I didn't even have time to pause at that time. Chinese investors, was a bailout. Beijing was already one step ahead of the protesters. Take the case of Peter Wang. As Reuters reports, Wang was asleep at his home in Beijing last Monday when police officers arrived before dawn to detain him. Now, that must be why these corporate heads over in China take off. Saying he had helped organize a protest planned for later that day. Peter wasn't alone, and across Beijing, others who had lost money investing in China's online peer-to-peer lending platforms, including some who had traveled from halfway across the country, got similar visits from police. So they are saying, look, you effed up, and since this is a communist country anyways, we're not even going to allow you to protest. Even if it was for a good reason, we wouldn't allow you to. But this ain't a good reason. You're not going to protest to get your money back from a freaking platform that you know is a damn Ponzi. Why the crackdown? Because by the time they were released, the demonstration they had planned using social media chat groups had fizzled amid a massive security response around the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission headquarters in the heart of Beijing's financial district. Those protesters who did show up were in for a surprise. Instead of demanding that the government bail out the hundreds of collapsed peer-to-peer companies, they were forced onto buses and carted away to, I don't even know how to pronounce that, a holding center for petitioners on the outskirts of Beijing, according to two Reuters sources. Once the police checked your ID cards and saw your petition materials, they knew you are here looking to protest your rights. Then they put you on a bus directly, said Wang, who works at an auto repair shop and who is a perfect representative of China's prevailing ideology that a government bailout of any investment is a fundamental right. Bail us all out. Wang did not give up, and after his detention, he joined a separate, smaller protest in a different part of Beijing. There was no channel to solve any problems. All they cared about was preventing any disturbance. The latest burst of anger, which led to the planned protest, flared up ahead of a June 30th deadline for companies to comply with new business practice standards, which are still being finalized, and as noted above, many peer-to-peers shut down rather than face tougher regulations. Zhang Wang, chief executive of online microloan provider China Rapid Finance, told Reuters. That caused panic in the broader market. Investors tried to pull funds from peer-to-peer companies, causing liquidity problems for many smaller operators, Wang said. Although larger ones are faring better, some platforms might become a winner out of this, and some platforms, probably a large portion of the platforms, might not be able to make it, he said. That sounds about right. This is not the first time China was burned on peer-to-peer platforms, which traditionally lend to customers that might be deemed too risky for a commercial bank, which has resulted in liquidity crises when too many investors demand their funds at once if loans appear to be going south. The most famous case of peer-to-peer fraud is Izubao, a $7.6 billion Ponzi scam involving more than 900,000 investors, which we described in early 2016, and which led to a similar forceful government crackdown after the public demanded a full bailout. While none has come close to the scale of that one, there are currently more than 100 publicly listed Chinese companies that are involved in peer-to-peer, and 32 of those own more than 30% of a peer-to-peer company, according to a July research report by CITIC Securities. Exacerbating the problems facing the peer-to-peer industry, China extended by 2 years a separate June 30 deadline for an online finance cleanup campaign. But rather than calming matters, it created more uncertainty, market watchers said, as CITIC Securities estimated that under the campaign, only about 100 platforms out of 1,836 would be able to meet even today's regulatory standards and obtain a license. Less than 50 would actually thrive. Oh boy. As for individual investors such as the above-mentioned Peter Wang, who was so sure it is his right to be bailed out by the government, the pain is acute. He and his family have invested 7 million yuan, their life savings, with which they had planned to use to buy a home at the end of the year, in 2 peer-to-peer platforms that have shut down. They recovered none of their investments. How many people put in more money than they should on things that are super risky? We heard, I saw it with BitPetite. Joe, I put in $8,000 in it. What? That means you must have tens of thousands to invest. No, that's all I had. Did you not see my video? BitPetite, you might lose everything. You probably shouldn't do this. I'm warning you now. This is scary. We could risk it all and lose it all. And a bunch of people followed me over the waterfall. Niagara Falls on that one. You don't gamble with money you can't afford to lose. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2. What about rule 3? So anyways, this is just crazy. You know, and I thought this might have been leading into like a bank bailout. Well, it says bank run. You know, bank run on 2 peer-to-peer lenders. Anyways, you know, looks like this isn't exactly the first time this has happened in China, but it's totally worth doing a video about, because this is just more and more cracks forming in the financial system. And like it said, Chinese household debt over the past year has soared by over 40%. 1 year, their household debt. I told you, this isn't a U.S. thing, this is a worldwide thing. The debt bubble. When that sucker goes, Again, people, the bankruptcy. I mean, I don't even want to think about it. It's going to be terrible. Take care.